Tools and Means. Written and read by John Miro. Episode 3. "Sorry goddamn excuse for a quarterback," Eldon barked. He jabbed the mute on the battered remote control in his hand and flung it down onto the coffee table. Now, Tom teased, the slip of your tongue is more dangerous than the slip of his feet. Eldon raised his eyebrows and stared sidelong. "You picked that up working on your pipeline?" Tom nodded. "The wisdom of Uthman ibn Affan, one of the companions of Muhammad. Good advice for armchair quarterbacks, too, don't you think?" "You bring back homey wisdom like other folks get souvenirs and sunburns," Eldon growled. "Armchair quarterbacks," he muttered. "Privilege of our nation to sit on our ass and ignore the wisdom of the ages." Eldon's tone grew more serious. "Saw some good people on the ground in Iraq, back in Gulf War I. No money or government support, but I saw some amazing things made out of nothing. Poor doesn't make you dumb or simple. It makes you ingenious. Not too many corn-fed Americans got that kind of cleverness anymore, present company excepted, of course." Tom hid a grin. He wondered if any of Eldon's buddies at the FBI would believe how much the man liked to talk when he was drunk. Or, he thought again, if it was only something Boudreaux did with him. "Necessity is the mother of invention," he said as he put down his second beer, only half consumed, back down on the coffee table. Eldon cackled and drained his fifth bottle. "It is." Then he got quiet. Tom looked across the leather sofa to see if the older man had closed his eyes and nodded off, only to find him looking back, a little sadly. "It surely is," he said again. Tom felt a lump in his throat, feeling the nearness and nakedness of the earliest memory the two men shared. "Necessity's a great teacher," Eldon slurred, "and there's some that never learn." He reached out with the freshly emptied bottle and tapped it to the side of Tom's head. The dig was a kindness, Tom knew, and designed to push the conversation off course. All the same, the lump in Tom's throat grew bigger, not smaller. He loved Eldon. The man had saved his life and then given him a way to stay sane, a kind of surrogate father to talk to look up to, and sometimes fake good cheer for, because he loved Boudreaux and didn't want to think of what the retired FBI man would think of who Tom really was, what he was. "Speaking of never learn, guess what? Someone cleaned up another of my repeat offenders that got away." Tom raised his eyebrows. "Cop come with a list of questions again?" Eldon barked. "No, none of them have the stones to try that no more. One assistant DA come talk to me, last one back. But this time just a friend called to tell me I alibied out. Most know I ain't a trophy hunter by now. They're just telling me to let me know." He yawned, shook his head to clear it, and Tom knew the alcohol had him in a chokehold now. Eldon shrugged. "Happens every once in a while. A badge goes out and closes cases himself, hook or by crook." He looked Tom in the eyes. "Might have done it once myself." Tom was grateful for Eldon saying that, and he knew that the man who'd finished raising him probably would have killed Bob if the killer had made it out of Tom's childhood home. And he was grateful for the blindness that kept Eldon, a sharp and logical mind even in retirement, from seeing Tom for what he really was. He thought all of that, but all he did was nod his thanks and let Eldon assign whatever meaning he wanted. Eldon leaned forward and staggered to his feet. He swayed once, then steadied. "How's Allie?" he asked quietly. Tom shrugged, buying time to find his voice. "She's doing good. There's a male nurse there, Paolo, who sees to it she's in the sun every nice day they have. She's healthy, not sleeping all the time, so I guess that's..." The lump grew bigger and choked off his words. "Shit," whispered Eldon. The word gave away the raw pain that the Brogan family's demise still stirred in him. He stood there a moment, silent. Tom waited beside him, just as quiet. "Good to see you, boy." No jibe or humor camouflaged the love he felt for the younger man. Tom's shame burned a little more at that, but just a little. A lot of them felt better, sitting on the familiar, ratty old couch, listening to the man, the closest thing to a family Tom knew, take a deep breath and shamble out into the hall. He heard Eldon's bedroom door click closed, and the spring of his bed groaned soon after, taking Eldon's drunk weight. Tom sat in place on the couch, his face lit by the images on the flat screen across the room. It was the only sign of life on his face as he waited, and remembered. He remembered Eldon carrying him out of his childhood home, Eldon at his bedside at the hospital. He remembered Eldon driving him back to this apartment. He remembered Eldon driving him to college a few months later, Eldon watching him graduate 3 years later, and again with his master's 2 years after that. And then Eldon started to snore, loud and harsh like a buzzsaw. Tom stood, walked into the hall to the second bedroom, which held both the sofa bed Tom had logged more hours on than any other horizontal surface in the world, and Eldon's filing cabinets and office desk. He didn't even bother to close the door before he knelt before the 2-drawer filing cabinet and plugged the combination into the heavy padlock. He thumbed by memory halfway through the racked manila folders until his fingers fell on a fat one, creased with use, faded with age. He pulled the file, left the drawer open, and sat at Eldon's desk. Eldon's only souvenir from his time at the bureau. The cases he couldn't close before trading his badge for his pension. He opened the heavy-hanging folder and spread the 17 manila envelopes inside like playing cards before him. He sat there for an hour or more, savoring each turn of every page, each reunion with mug shots and surveillance photographs Eldon had crossed out with a red X after news of that folder's owner's demise had reached him. Then Tom flipped open a folder with no line through the photo clipped inside, one of only 2 still free of Eldon's red pen. He didn't need to open the folder. He'd memorized all the information years ago, and added scores more to his mental tally since then, but it was part of the ritual. His fingers rubbed against the uneven bottom edges of the papers assembled inside Senator George Newell's folder. He tidied the stack, and then scratched his nails gently over the man's face. Only 2 more. What would he do when they were gone too? Would he stop? Could he ever stop? It didn't matter now. There was work to do still. "I'm coming for you," he whispered. "See you in Miami, George." St. Trinian's Care Facility, Chicago. Tom watched from the doorway as a skinny man in medical greens with shoulder-length brown hair and long fingers pressed Allie's bedsheet smooth beneath her arms. Paolo had worked at St. Trinian's for 3 years, and as far as Tom was concerned, he was the best thing about the place. He was talking to Allie in a low, soothing murmur, and Tom waited for the nurse to collect his sister's lunch tray and say goodbye. His eyes flicked to the bookcase on the other side of the room. The snow globe he brought her from Alaska, the dancing American Indian painted on a flat red rock he'd come back from Utah with, the framed pictures of those wonders of the world he'd visited in his travels. Most of the souvenirs were also something more. They were tied to a red X in one of Eldon's files, trophies of his revenge on the Bobs of the world, and they were his gifts to his sister to remind her what treasures the world still held when she was ready to come back to it. Paolo flinched a little when he turned and saw Tom in the door, but recovered quickly and gave him a grin. "Mr. Brogan, good to see you." He turned back to his patient. "Allie, look who's here." "Hey, sis," Tom said as he stepped into the room. "Sorry to interrupt," he offered, but Paolo waved the concern away. "We're all done." "I think she'll like the shepherd's pie," Paolo said, quirking his lips in a gentle smile. "She eats faster when the cafeteria serves up shepherd's pie." "That's good," Tom said, smiling into Allie's vacant eyes. "Good to see they're fattening you up," he called to her. Paolo collected the empty tray and a plastic box of other supplies. "Sun's peeking out on the back patio. If you'd like some help." It was Tom's turn to wave away Paolo's offer. "Allie and I have this down too." "Have a good visit, Al," Paolo called to his patient and left the room. Tom followed the nurse out, and closed the door. He leaned against its heavy steel as it shushed its way into place, and his grin widened as he stared at his older sister, Allie Brogan, pride of the Brogan family. "He's taking good care of you. Think he's a bit sweet on you, sis," he joked, and walked over to sit on the far side of the bed and look out her window. The long-term care facility sat on 16 beautiful acres. The view out the window was of a winding path through trees, park-like and tranquil. He sat there a minute and listened to Allie breathe, then looked down into her slack eyes. He forced a smile and held up a small, colorful bag. "Eldon has another red line to draw," he told her, and pulled a small die-cast model of the Seattle Space Needle from the bag. He watched her face carefully, as he always did, for any sign of reaction in the emotionless mask Allie had worn for 8 long years. And just like every time before, nothing changed on her face. He sighed, walked across the room, and found a place for the model on the crowded bookcase. "Remember the photographer, Redding? Eldon had him dead to rights on at least one murder, his business partner, and liked him for a couple of female models who went missing around the same time." He brushed a piece of blonde hair from her face. It was coarse, dry. He sighed. "Cops got some paperwork wrong. All the evidence was thrown out." He looked out the window. "But I balanced the scales." Then he slapped his hands on his knees. "Let's get you outside." He transferred her carefully into her wheelchair and pushed her out the door with bursts of playful speeds, catching her up on his life. "I enjoyed Iraq. It was really something. Every day I worked with people like us, people who had everything taken away. I'll go back someday." He remembered the children who would follow him along the chain-link fence outside the pipeline station he'd worked out of, the joyous games they'd play with nothing more than rocks. "I saw them smile, Allie, laugh, when they'd had loved ones killed, or—" He looked down at his sister, remembering just in time that she had suffered worse. He kissed her head. "I'd like to learn how to laugh like that again. How about you?" He navigated his sister past familiar receptionists and floor staff, crossing to the patio door, nodding his studied smile. No one seemed to be able to tell he was faking the easygoing smile. Not anymore. "Eldon's good. Still lonely, and refusing to do anything about it. Limp's getting a bit worse where—" He finished the thought in his head, not out loud. "Where Bob got to him. Where Bob stabbed him when he pulled the bastard off you." I'll have to talk to him, make sure he's still taking physio for that leg. Other than that, he walks a ton, goes on fishing trips with his buddies, still keeps in touch with the Bureau. Doesn't seem to be slowing down any in his retirement." He pushed her off the wooden deck and onto the pine needles of a trail that curved through the trees. He didn't say anything for a while, just pushed her along, breathed in the crisp air, the pine scent, and enjoyed being with his sister, what was left of her. "I kept in touch with the administrator and Paolo while I was away, and your new night nurse, what's her name? The college kid?" Tom didn't sleep much, and calling back to the States to check in with Allie's support team, it was a good excuse to avoid drinking binges with the other American engineers and oil men. "Sounds like your weight is up again," he teased, like he always would tease the other Allie, the one he absolutely knew was still in there, still trapped somewhere inside the shell. "I'm going to be around for a while this time. I'm negotiating with a construction firm to do some work in Boston. Should keep me busy a good year or so. Thought I'd get an apartment, spend the weekends here." More silence, more pine needles crunching under the wheels of Allie's chair. He watched his sister's hair move in the wind. Was it his imagination, or had she turned her head up towards the sun? "I'm going hunting again. A hometown boy, Senator George Newell. Don't worry," Tom said quickly, imagining what Allie on the inside must have been thinking of the news. He refused to believe Allie on the inside wasn't still there. "Don't worry, I won't break the rules." Tom had made himself a promise the very first day he'd knelt at her bedside and told her about the mission he'd chosen for himself. One rule was that he would never hunt anywhere near where Allie lived. "I do like to take more times between the balancing acts," he said, picking up on the objections he was sure Allie would be making if she could. if Bob hadn't broken her. But this Newell's a politician, practically untouchable here, and he's heading to a law and order conference down in Miami. Too good a chance to pass up, he said, as conversationally as he could. Truth be told, he was already itching. Truth be told, he needed another kill already. Truth be told, he didn't know how he was going to stop. There was only 2 files left, he remembered, with a shudder. He was quiet for a long time. Too long, he knew. Mom and Dad shared a monument and matching coffins in the dirt across town. His sister deserved better than an absentee brother, but then again, without Bob, without the world shitting on his whole family, she wouldn't need any taking care of. And he had to make it right. Allie had always been the strong one, the one Tom went to with all his troubles before. Now there was no one for him to talk to, but the phantom Allie and the phantom Bob. He swallowed hard and pushed her a little faster. So, what can I bring you back from Florida, sis? You have been listening to Tools and Means. Title music, Infiltrate This, by Atlas Plug, used with permission. For show notes, more information, and other fiction by me, John Muro, please visit servingworlds.com. Thank you for listening.